The other thing I should mention that I think is like really important context to have is that we ended up flying home in the middle of our trip for 2 weeks because of a family emergency. That cost us nearly $8,000. So that's like a lot of the budget. Half of it was reimbursed by insurance. But I just want to say, like, this is the biggest PSA for A, travel insurance, and B, over budgeting. Because there was absolutely no way that we were not going to come home for this. Like, it was a really loved family member that we needed to see. It was worth every single penny, but luckily we had over budgeted. So like we had the money to do it and we had travel insurance. So we got half of it reimbursed. Just a PSA, always be prepared.
A big thank you to SafetyWing, who are collaborating with today's episode. They are my go-to travel insurance for any of my trips, and they've bailed me out before. They are super reliable, have a great app to use, and I wouldn't go with anyone else. Let's get stuck into the episode. If there is anything that's different, what has changed?
I would say the biggest shock was the price of flights.
Yes.
You definitely noticed that flights are more expensive. In general, I wouldn't say that I found traveling more expensive, like slightly, but not to a degree that I was like, this is not sustainable. And there's a lot to do in Stone Town. Like, there's a lot of cultural events you can attend. You can take boats out to other islands. You can just wander because the city is like very, very old with like old winding streets. We were just like, we loved it. Oh, and the markets, like the fish market in the morning, just going there and seeing what everyone had caught was just, Luke and I still say, it was early in the trip, so it might have been like that early in the trip impact of just like, wow, we're like really on this trip now. But we talk about Stone Town all the time, about how much we miss it.
Welcome to the Winging It Travel podcast with me, James Hammond. Every Monday, I'll be joined by guests to talk about their travel stories, travel tips, backpacking advice, and so much more. Are you a backpacker, gap year student, or simply someone who loves to travel? Then this is the podcast for you, designed to inspire you to travel. There'll be stories to tell, tips to share, and experiences to inspire. Welcome to the show. Hello and welcome to this week's episode where I'm rejoined by a returning guest and friend of mine, Erin Hynes from the Curious Tourism podcast. Erin has just completed a 165-day round-the-world trip, visiting various countries, which we'll discuss today. As we've both recently been on big trips and finished them, I've got some interesting discussion points and talking points for us to discuss. Erin, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, not too bad. Are you in Toronto right now?
I am in Toronto, back home.
How's it feel?
Feels weird. You know that feeling, like mixture of like kind of happy to see people I really missed, really happy to see my cat, really happy to see my family, but do I wish I was traveling still? Yes.
Okay, exactly the same as me. I think it is a tougher reintegration period for Canada in the winter. Like, we came back to snow and it was a big adjustment.
Luke and I planned this. We were like, we are going to come back to Toronto at the best time of year to soften the blow.
So good. Yeah, I wish I was like that, but hey, here we are. So we're going to delve into your trip because I'm intrigued to obviously hear about your trip. But I've got some discussion points about, I guess, travel as a whole, because we've both been on what I would consider long trips. Maybe like personally what you've learned, but also in brackets the travel industry and what you've learned from traveling around the world. And then we'll touch on your podcast, because the last time you were on my podcast, it was a different name. So we're going to clear up in terms of what it's called now. And I guess you still do the same things, but also an update on it. Like, are you interviewing, any seasons coming up, stuff like that. Right. Let's get into, straight off the bat, you both quit your jobs to go and travel the world. Why? And any thought processes in terms of instantly where we're going to go, how long for, or was it quite a spontaneous decision?
I would say it was spontaneous and it wasn't. We, for years, knew that it was something that we wanted to do. During the pandemic years, obviously, we were just stuck at home. And so we decided to just start saving aggressively with the idea that if the moment ever comes, we'll go for it. And that moment finally came. It was mainly due to stuff going on at my husband's job. Long story short, he just was not having a good time. And he had an opportunity to leave. And so we sat down, we talked about it. I was like really on the fence because I was really liking my job. I'd been there like a couple years. And to be honest, I didn't really want to leave it. But we had agreed that like when the moment came that we should do it. And it was just like perfect timing because it was just going into winter, like late fall. We had the money because we had been saving. We had an opportunity for a friend of mine to sublet our apartment. So it was just kind of like all these pieces fell together and we just said, okay, we should just do it. So I took the dive. I decided I would like ask my job if I could go on 6-month leave. They unfortunately said no. And so I resigned.
Wow. I got offered a 1-year sabbatical.
You are so lucky.
But I said no. And
that is ballsy. I wish I had the balls to do that. I would have absolutely said yes.
It's a bold move. There's a few reasons, right? Because number one, we wasn't sure if Vancouver was the place to come back to in Canada. It was Canada,
Okay.
but we, as you well know, we were discussing Toronto and other places over east. And number two, I had a feeling, and this has been kind of proved subsequently, that the role or a role similar would come up anyway because it's a busy place, lots going on, big project, 10-year project. So I wasn't overly concerned if I came back to Vancouver, if there'd be something available. And right now, there was, and I took it in late last year. So yeah, ballsy move. And I think pros and cons of both. But interesting
Definitely.
that you tried to get that 6-month sabbatical, yeah. How do you think, I know we're jumping way ahead here, but how do you think that would have changed your trip if you knew you had 6 months down the line a job to come back to?
Oh, that is such a good question. I think that we would have been less worried about our budget throughout the trip. I think we probably, because we're going to talk about this more in depth, but we went into the trip with a set budget of 40,000 Canadian dollars. And I think we would have been willing to spend on more expensive experiences throughout the trip if we had known that we were coming back to employment. Because on top of the 40K that we saved, we also had $20,000 saved as our like coming home fund. And that's designed to like help us survive for 6 months since coming home, just in case we can't find jobs. So if we had known that one of us for sure had a job, I think we would have been like happy to spend that $20,000. Who knows on what? It's like kind of hard to spend 20K, but yeah, I could see us doing like a longer trek or just like, who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, the options are endless, right?
They really are.
Yeah, if I had it, I think I would have been a bit more ballsy with my money as well. Yeah, you're right. I would have gone way into the coming home budget, which was less than yours. Interestingly, we had around 8,000 to 10,000 Canadian dollars, but that dwindled because of a few factors. That's why I took the job quite quickly.
We over prepare for things because we ended up not needing, like we're going to get into this, but we ended up not needing our coming home fund at all. But the other thing I'll mention is that I think we would have been less like worried about budget. Like it would have been less like at top of mind because like a lot of our decisions, like even a daily decision, like should we eat dinner here or should we eat dinner here? And it's like, okay, this is like 20% cheaper. Let's eat here. Little decisions like that. I think we would have been like more willing to spend like the extra $2-3 here and there if we had known that we were going to be employed coming home. Yeah,
I think the biggest area for us in terms of what you're saying there would have been food, because Emma is trying to be vegan but definitely doesn't eat meat, maybe go vegetarian, right? But in places like Taiwan and South Korea, really difficult to find vegan food that's budget friendly in terms of the street markets, right? You might find the odd thing. But we found some really cool places to have vegan food that was specifically vegan, like in Korea and stuff, but they're expensive. So I think if we had that extra budget, it would have made things a bit more happier and easier in those countries to go and do the vegan food stuff. Because even I didn't like much of the meat stuff in those countries as well. So but let's get back to pre-trip or about to go to the trip. So did you plan much pre-trip in terms of maybe booking any experiences in, any tours? Did you even book or have a route? So that includes a time scale with flights here. Like, did you have anything like that, or was it almost all on the fly?
I would say it was mostly on the fly. The only things we booked up front were our flights departing from Toronto, obviously. We planned basically the first, I would say, 4 weeks of the trip loosely. And then after that, it was all sort of up for debate. We had like an idea of where we wanted to go, but none of it was firm. The only firm plans were that we were going to go first to Greece for about a week and then go to Tanzania. And because in Tanzania, obviously, like the thing that everyone wants to do is safari, we did plan for that. We joined a G Adventures tour. It's better to book them in advance. So we booked it as far in advance as we could. Basically, the second we knew we were doing the trip, we knew that we were going to go first to Tanzania and that we had to find a safari to join. So that's really the only thing we booked. Like, we didn't really book hotels or anything. We just booked like all the flights to get us to Tanzania, and we booked our safari, and that's it.
And you didn't book a flight home?
No.
And you didn't? So is that because you didn't know where you're going to be?
Yeah. We had no idea. We didn't even book a flight out of Tanzania, which was a problem because we were trying to fly into Tanzania and they were like, you need a flight out. Otherwise you can't enter the country.
What happens if you just say, well, I'm going to go overland?
I don't know. I didn't want to test it.
Okay.
Because border control, I'm like, authority scares me. So I was just like, okay, I'll book a flight right now, sir.
Oh, wow.
And we had no idea where we were going. So we were just like, okay, I guess we'll book a flight to like a country next door. It was a mess.
God, now you got me thinking, because I've booked my flight to El Salvador for November, right? But I've not booked anything out because I'm going overland. So I don't know if I'm going to get asked that question at the airport, like, how are you getting out of the country? I'm not sure what type of countries would ask that.
You can actually check, like it says online, like you just check their entry and exit requirements. Okay. But a little hack that I have since learned is what you do is you use Expedia to book just a random flight out, and you book it like a couple hours before flying in so that you have the ticket that Expedia has sent you. And Expedia has a 24-hour refund rule. So if you cancel the flight within 24 hours, they give you a full refund. I've since done this. It works. So what I would say is, like, if you're worried about this, before you get on your flight, like in the airport, just buy a random flight out for like the cheapest one you can find. Then you have the ticket to show at immigration, and then you can just cancel it when you get into the country.
Great hack and tip that is. I did not know that. That's an experienced traveler's tip.
Research.
Okay, research. I don't think El Salvador will be a problem because they have the visa agreement between the 4 countries in Central America, which is
Nicaragua. I was going to say, I've never had an issue in Central America. I've traveled like quite a lot around there, and I don't think I've ever been asked.
Cool. So it should be fine. Okay. And did you have a rough itinerary? So you knew the first 4 weeks, but did you have countries that are beyond those, I guess beyond Tanzania, that you definitely knew you want to visit?
Yeah, there were a few countries that we were like 100% we're going to these countries, and those were India, Sri Lanka, Nepal. Those 3 countries were for sure. And then we had a short list, I would say, of other countries that we wanted to visit, and that was like based on budget, location, and time. Yeah.
Okay. And any rogue countries back of the mind you might think, do you know what? Park it. If we get around that area, let's dip in and check it out. Any of those countries in the back of the mind?
Yeah. What were our back of the mind countries? Mongolia was a big one.
Oh, yeah.
That's a country that if we had known we were going to be employed, we would have gone to. Because the reason we didn't go is because it's very expensive. If we had known that we would have jobs, we 100% would have gone. Another back pocket one was Bangladesh, randomly.
Okay. Yeah.
We had just like met people who told us that it was great. This is where like fear perception comes in, though. We were just like, is it safe? We're not really sure. We just didn't like feel ready to commit to that country. But it's still on our list for the future. And I would say Japan and Korea. We did end up going there, spoiler alert, but they were definitely like back pocket. Like if we have the budget and the time, like maybe we'll be able to squeeze them in.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we always plan to go to South Korea because we can fly direct from Seoul to Vancouver, right? Because we had our road trip planned pretty much set in stone. So we had to get a flight out. Expensive flight that was. Bloody hell.
I would say the focus like for us was South Asia for sure.
South Asia. Okay.
Going into the trip. We'd been before, we're like, we are big fans of South Asia. So we knew like, since we have time, like we just want to spend a lot of time in South Asia.
Yeah, I think we had East Asia was our focus, and also Middle East. So I guess it's like West and East Asia, if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, but we did end up going to Nepal because it's an amazing country, right? I'll come to Nepal in a minute though. I've got a few more questions, which leads us nicely onto budget. You mentioned before your budget, $40,000 Canadian dollars for 6 months.
Yep.
Did you have a reason for that in mind?
It was how much money we had. Basically, we looked at our bank accounts. We looked at like our savings and our investments. We were like, what are we willing to spend? I suffer with generalized anxiety disorder. So I was like, how much can I spend without like having an anxiety breakdown?
All those people expecting like a real in-depth, like real thought-provoking answer. That's just what we had.
I will add that like obviously we crunched numbers, like we did do some research, like how much do we think this will cost? And I will say we did not think that we were going to spend the entire budget. We did. We actually went over budget, but we thought that we were going to come home with like more money. Like we thought we were going to spend maybe around like 32 to 35. Things got derailed because we didn't end up staying in South Asia as long as we expected. And we had traveled in South Asia before, so we knew like roughly what we were going to spend on like a month of travel in that region of the world. We had intended to be in that region of the world for like 4 months, and we were only there for about 2 months. So our budget like kind of got upended in the end, but it's a good thing we ended up like, what I'm saying is 40,000 was an over budget in our minds, but it was good that we over budgeted because we did end up going over. Interesting,
because I think you asked me about what our budget was for our year-long trip, and it wasn't much more than that. Between 45 and 50.
The other thing I should mention that I think is like really important context to have is that we ended up flying home in the middle of our trip for 2 weeks because of a family emergency. That cost us nearly $8,000. So that's like a lot of the budget. Half of it was reimbursed by insurance. But I just want to say like this is the biggest PSA for A, travel insurance, and B, over budgeting. Because there was absolutely no way that we were not going to come home for this. Like it was a really loved family member that we needed to see. And so it was worth every single penny, but luckily we had over budgeted. So like we had the money to do it, and we had travel insurance. So we got half of it reimbursed. So yeah, just a PSA, always be prepared. And they paid us out nearly $4,000. So like the insurance paid for itself just with this one incident. But then like realistically, like if that hadn't happened, we would have only spent, I think like around 34,000. So yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I was going to come to that, but as you're there now, just a quick question. Where were you?
We were in Nepal. I will preface this by saying, like this family member of ours was ill, and we knew that he was ill for weeks. So this was like a decision we came to like over the course of a couple weeks. So sort of towards the end of our time in Sri Lanka and our first 2 weeks in Nepal, it was becoming clear to us that like we needed to go home. And so it was halfway through our time in Nepal that we decided to do that.
Yeah, 100% key.
Yeah.
Okay. And what was the distance in terms of time between the last time you travelled? So like what I would say is proper travel, long-term travel. So that time, what was the distance in time? 5 or 6 years?
The last time was 2017. So 6, almost 7 years for a long trip, for multi-month trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned before that you kept your apartment in Toronto. Am I right to believe that because you have quite a good deal on that apartment, it's worth keeping? Because as we know, the rental crisis in Canada is huge.
Yeah, there was no way we were going to give up our apartment. I can't afford to live in this city.
If you had no one to sublet to, you'd have kept it, right? And put it into your budget, I'd imagine, right?
I think we would have just paid the rent, honestly. Yeah. Or we would have just said to like a friend of ours who lives with roommates, like, do you want to live in our apartment for free for 6 months? We'll pay the rent. Just like stay here with our cat.
Oh, yeah, I can see your cat. Love it. Okay. And when you started to know you're going to go on a trip, bearing in mind it's been 6-7 years before you last travelled, what were the feelings? Were you nervous? Were you excited? Was there any apprehension? Has anything changed since, I guess it would because people get old, but like from the last time you travelled to now? Like any sort of feelings that are worth sharing?
Oddly, like I was nervous, but this sounds so unhinged, but I was mostly nervous about leaving my cat. And like, this is like going back to my mental health situation. She's like a big, like part of my mental health, like relief. And so I knew it was going to be hard for me to be without her. I know this sounds so silly. It's just like, I love this cat so much. And the idea of like being away from her for 6 months, like was very hard on me.
No, it's fine. Yeah,
I know that sounds so, some people like won't understand that, but that was just me. The travel itself, no problem. Like I was sad to say goodbye to my family for 6 months. I would say it was like hard to say goodbye to my sister's kids because like they're really young, they're like growing. So I knew that we were going to miss like a big chunk of their growth. All of that was hard, but like the only thing that really made me anxious was the idea of not being with my cat. But like, yeah, other than that, no, like travel has never freaked me out. I was happy to do it. Quitting my job made me nervous, but once I was over that, over that hump of like quitting the job, I was like totally excited. Yeah.
And can you remind us of the allergies that you have, that you travel with?
Yeah, I have a severe allergy to peanut and a severe allergy to kiwi.
Kiwi, as in kiwi fruit?
Yes.
Is that, wow. Is that a normal thing?
I don't know. I don't meet many people that have a kiwi allergy. Apparently it's like not a thing because I have it, but
yeah, of course,
it's definitely not as common as like a peanut allergy. And it's also not as much of like, it doesn't impact my life, I wouldn't say, as much as my peanut allergy because you don't tend to like see kiwi around that often. I'm like a little worried because it's becoming a bit of a like trendy health food, at least in Toronto. Like I'm starting to see kiwi like on breakfast plates and stuff. So that's like bad news for me. No more brunches. But yeah, in general, it's just peanut that I worry about the most, especially traveling.
Okay. And I think I might ask maybe that question in each country in terms of the allergies, peanut or kiwi, if that was a problem or not. But let's get stuck into the countries. I think these are in order, right? Roughly. So we've got quite a few on here that I want to ask questions about. I'm actually going to kick off with Greece. I went to Greece in December 2022. And I knew at that point that I was probably going to go away the year after. So I went with like that feeling of, I guess, not blowing the budget, but do you know what? I still got another 6 weeks, 7 weeks of money coming in. We pretty much saved up for our trip. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
And I had a new appreciation because I've never been there before, right? So I went to Athens and Carpathos Island and absolutely loved it, and the Peloponnese. So where did you visit? Was that the first time you've been, or was it a returning visit?
It was a returning visit. I'd been in Greece once before, and the time I was there before, I met the man I married. So it was a fitting country to go to because Luke and I met on the island of Corfu in 2010 at the Pink Palace, which is a well-known hostel on the Backpacker Trail. So we had met there, and we actually got married in the summer of 2023. And so when we knew we were going to go to Tanzania, we knew we wanted to stop over somewhere in Europe, like on the way, just to break up the difficult flight. And we thought, let's go to Greece. Like, it's kind of there's like a beautiful circularity in that like we met there and we've just gotten married and now we're back in Greece. So we did debate going to Corfu. And I actually reached out to the Pink Palace and I told them, like, I sent them a picture of us at the Pink Palace in 2010 and a picture of us on our wedding day. And they just like loved it. And they were like, you guys got to come, like, we'll host you.
Yeah.
But it's just like hard to get there. And we were there in January, so it wasn't the best weather. So because it was winter, we decided, okay, let's do like more mainland Greece. And I also feel like mainland Greece gets overlooked a lot. So
yes,
we wanted to give like Athens a fair shot. I hear a lot of hate towards Athens. And I was like, I have a feeling I'm going to like it, which I did.
Yeah.
So we did Athens and then we rented a car and we did a little road trip up to Meteora and back. So yeah, we kept it pretty simple. We did like 4 days Athens. I think we were there 8 days. So we did 4 days Athens and then 4 days on our little road trip.
Okay. And driving, I don't know if I told you the story when I last saw you in Toronto, but I sometimes take winging it a bit too far. And what I mean by that is I had this hire car and there's toll roads in Greece. And normally the pictures depict what lane to go in, right? And I just saw like e-payment, as in like you pay online. I thought, fuck, it's a hire car. It's been paid for. Why not? So I went to the gate. I'm on my own, right? And it won't open. And by this time, because it's a motorway, I've got 4 or 5 cars behind me backed up, and it's the most awful feeling when you can't go through. There's no one there because it's like e-barriers. And I'm out of the car telling people, can you back up because I need to get out here, and trying to reverse out onto oncoming traffic. Absolutely stressful. But that was my Greece
driving experience.
Yeah, so I never took that chance again. Bloody hell. But Greece, in the off season, it's amazing to travel to, right? There's no one there.
Yeah, there was no one. It was great. And honestly, the weather was amazing. Like on our way up to Meteora, we had heard about this hot spring that you can stop at. And so we went there and we just like had this place to ourselves. There were like a few other campers, but that was it.
My advice, if you go in like December or January, like we both did, I went to Karpathos because it's right on a southern tip between Rhodes and Crete. And it's like probably the warmest it's going to get in Greece at that time. So if you're looking for like a nice 17, 18, 19 degrees Christmas, it's a good place to go. Yeah. And nice. What's Greece like for your allergies?
Pretty easy. I would say there isn't tons of peanut used in things, and communication is pretty simple, especially like in cities like Athens where they're used to having like foreign tourists all the time. Yeah. Most restaurants, it was like very simple to explain my allergy and ask about things. And I don't think I saw a single peanut the entire time we were in Athens, which was amazing for me. And I love Greek food. So yeah, it was a great place to kick off the trip. And
Athens is a great city, isn't it? I know it does get a lot of hate, but I absolutely love the place.
Yeah, me too. We loved it.
Endless things to do.
Truly. And the history is incredible. Just like everywhere you turn, there's just like history. It's incredible.
Yeah. And I think in the off season, there won't be too many queues to get into the popular things like the Acropolis. Exactly. So I can imagine in the summer, that's pretty chaotic.
Yeah. And I will say the same for Meteora. Meteora apparently in the summer is absolutely packed. And that was not our experience at all. We were able to, for those who don't know, Meteora is like a region of Greece that's north of Athens, where they have these very tall like mountains that jut up out of the ground. And monasteries were built on top of those mountains like hundreds of years ago. And so you can go and visit various monasteries. It's a little tiring because you do have to climb like tons and tons of stairs, obviously, to get up to them. But the views are absolutely magical. And the monasteries just have really interesting history. And you can learn a lot about the religious history, especially of Greece there. So yeah, I think doing that in winter is the best time because apparently like in the summer, it's very, very overpacked. And I honestly like thought a lot about whether like it's a good like model of tourism happening there, just because like religious places, I don't know if you find this, but this was something I thought about a lot on this trip. I sometimes feel a bit weird about being a tourist in a religious place. And I was just thinking like, because there are monks like actively living in these monasteries, it must not be a nice experience to have like hundreds of tourists visiting every single day. And in the winter, it's not like that. So I felt a little better about like being present there during the winter because there weren't tons of crowds.
Yeah, that is a weird one. I do agree. Vatican City is a classic example of that.
Yeah.
It's just strange that it's a country that's kind of relying on these tourists to go and spend money, but it is actually a religious building, and it's like got these got the Pope in it and all these people, right? I am atheist to say the least, so it doesn't really make sense, does it?
Mm-hmm. Like there were moments on the trip, especially in Sri Lanka, like where we would visit temples and there would be like tourists wandering around taking pictures, but then there would also be people there like worshiping and praying. And I just felt like, I don't want to say it's disrespectful, but I felt like maybe there should be some limits on how many tourists are allowed into these spaces. Like the priority for these spaces should be like people who are there to practice religion. I always felt weird like taking up space like in a temple, especially these ones that were like very crowded.
Yeah, because I think we had the similar thought in the Middle East when we went to all these mosques. That could be parts of Turkey, or I went to a few in Lebanon as well. What I try to do, my rule really, is I try to embrace the moment and not try and get content. I've got a few photos and videos, obviously, but I try to like be amongst it and be in there present and not just see it as taking photos. Because I think that's the only respect I can really give, because I don't worship the religion, right?
Exactly. Like I would say I do the same, and I also just like try to take it as like a learning experience. Like what can I learn about this religion as someone who doesn't practice it, to like grow a greater appreciation for it. I'm not there just to like ogle at people practicing their religion. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, let's move on to Tanzania. So this is high on my list. The classic question would be, did you do a safari? And I assume you did, but also on my list is Zanzibar. I think that kind of intrigues me, that place. I think you went there too, right? So let's start off with a safari. And if you did do that, was it expensive, or how easy is it to book it?
Yes, we did do a safari. Yes, it is expensive, but I would say it wasn't as expensive as I expected it to be. Yeah, so we did our safari with G Adventures. We opted for like one of the most economical ways you can do a safari, which is by camping with a group. Nice. G Adventures is one of the few companies that offers this, which is why we decided to go with them. We paid about $4,000 for both of us, and that was for a 6-day, 5-night safari. Full disclosure, they did give us a media discount, so we saved $2,200. So for both of us, it would have been over $6K. But because we had the media discount, it was $4K, so $2,000 each. It is a lot of money, but once you see the logistics going into a camping safari, you realize like how worth it is. And there's also like permits involved. Some of the money goes towards conservation. So at the end of the day, like I felt that it was worth every single penny.
I think that's great value, actually. That's way less than what I thought you were going to say.
Mm-hmm. You can spend a lot more if you want to. If you want to go private and like stay in lodges, you're going to be paying double what we paid, right? For sure.
Got it.
And the other thing is like we gathered quotes from other companies. We could have done a private 3-day safari for around the same price. But at the end of the day, we thought if we go with G Adventures and camp, we get to go on safari for twice as long and we get to be with other people. And I know like a lot of couples like to just like be on their own, like the two of them all the time, but we're like pretty social, and we were like, we're going to be traveling for 6 months. Like, let's take this opportunity to spend 6 days with like a bunch of other cool young people. And we had the time of our lives. So I definitely recommend it.
Amazing. Okay. And I think for us, when we would get to Africa, I think Tanzania would probably be in the top 3. And I think that is on our list. I would probably do that actually. Camping would be pretty cool. For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Zanzibar. I think I remember probably this for some reason the most from your post during the trip, because I think I was like really intrigued about where you were staying and how you saw the island. I just liked your updates on it. Obviously, it's quite a long time ago now, but I do recall you staying in, is it Stone Town? Yeah, and I think that gets overlooked as well. So you had some interesting thoughts about that place. But Tanzania, it's kind of got that melting pot of cultures, right? And in my mind, it's like idyllic beaches, but I guess there's more to it than that.
The first thing I think is important to say is that Tanzania and Zanzibar actually were separate countries for a long time.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize this, but like you will notice like big cultural differences on, they call it the Swahili coast versus like inland Tanzania. So I do think it's like a really, really great experience to visit both. We were interested in Zanzibar because my sister's husband was posted in the Congo for years. He used to work for an NGO out there. And he had always told us how much he loves Zanzibar. He just like, it was one of his favorite places in East Africa. So we knew we had to take his advice and go there for at least a week, which is what we did. And interestingly, like a lot of people skip Stone Town. But my sister's husband knows us. He knows like we like cities. So he was like, I don't think you should skip it. I think you're going to like it. And we liked it so much that we had booked 3 days there. Then we had booked to go to the coast to spend time like on the beaches. We got to the beaches. We stayed there 24 hours and we were like, no, we're going back. And we went back to Stone Town. We spent like basically our entire time in Zanzibar in Stone Town. But I think it's because Stone Town feels less like there is tourism there, but the beach areas have been like, they've just been developed like for tourism. So you don't really feel like you're like engaging with Swahili culture at all when you're in the beach areas. Like everything there is for the tourists, all the infrastructure. Which is why we like Stone Town. We felt like we had like a lot of opportunities to like meet people and spend time with people there, which is definitely what happened. Like we would sit in restaurants and just end up like chatting with people, which was really amazing. And there's a lot to do in Stone Town. Like there's a lot of cultural events you can attend. You can take boats out to other islands. You can just wander because the city is like very, very old with like old winding streets. We were just like, we loved it. Oh, and the markets, like the fish market in the morning, just going there and seeing what everyone had caught was just, Luke and I still say it was early in the trip. So it might've been like that early in the trip impact of just like, wow, we're like really on this trip now. But we talk about Stone Town all the time about how much we miss it. And I'll also mention like there's interesting history to Zanzibar and Stone Town because it used to be like a very intensive like part of the trade route. So there was like European impact. There was a lot of Omani impact. There was a lot of Indian impact. So you actually see like a sort of blend of all these cultures there, which is really interesting. Like they're very famous for Zanzibari doors in Stone Town. So you can see these like intricately carved doors all over Stone Town that are actually a tradition that comes from India. And it was also the center of the East African slave trade. So you hear a lot of discussion about like the West African slave trade, but there was a slave trade on the East side as well. And Stone Town, unfortunately, was the epicenter of it. So there's a lot of history around that there. So you can go and visit like points of interest and learn. There's a museum. Yeah, it was a big learning curve for us because we knew about the West African slave trade, but had never heard about the East African one.
How did you book those like cultural experiences or those learning experiences? Did you go to a homestay? Did you, speak to someone who could book a tour for you? How did you learn about these things?
We just showed up. We booked into a small independently owned hotel. This is classic Luke and I. We booked into a small independently owned hotel and we just used our hotel as a resource because all the people running the hotel were from Stone Town. And so we had like a little joke going in Tanzania too. Like if you want to do something, just like ask someone and they'll call a guy. Yeah. And so that's how it worked. Like we would just tell our hotel, like, we would like to do this today and they would figure it out for us.
That's amazing.
But the museums and stuff, like you can just show up, like
Sure.
a lot of things you can literally just show up and go in. And often there are registered guides that you can hire at the entrance, which we did for a couple of them. And then that registered guide will take you through. But yeah, for the most part, it was kind of like on the fly planning. I think in Stone Town, we did end up finding a driver that we really liked. And so it was the classic, like, give us your WhatsApp and we would just WhatsApp him if we want to do something.
Okay. And no idea here about what food they eat in either Zanzibar or Tanzania. I'm not sure if it's different as well. But I imagine Zanzibar has a lot of fish, as you mentioned. So what is a dish or some of the dishes that you liked tasting? And was it quite easy for you to eat there?
It was pretty easy for me to eat in Tanzania. A lot of like what you eat there is just like rice and chicken type stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of Indian influence as well. So we actually ate a lot of Indian food in Zanzibar, especially. Not so much inland, but on the coast. Yeah, you can eat a lot of Indian food. So I ate a lot of chicken biryani. It was very good.
Oh, lovely. What's it like to travel between the mainland and the Zanzibar island? Is that a flight or is that a boat?
You can go by boat. We decided to go by flight because if we went by boat, it was just going to be like literally a 24-hour trip for us to get to the next place we were going. So we decided to fly it. But if you take the ferry, I believe it takes like half a day to take the ferry across. So yeah, you have lots of options.
Okay. And if you take the safari out of it, because that's a fixed cost, day to day, what's Tanzania like for budget and cost?
Not expensive. I think we were spending maybe around $20 a day on a hotel room. That's like a budget hotel room. The most expensive hotel room we probably had was maybe around $40 Canadian. I would say the only things that are expensive are like tours and guides. So safari obviously was expensive. But if you need tours and guides for anything, it's going to be like more expensive. I would put it actually on par with like tours in Europe almost. Like if you want to do a day trip to a waterfall, which is something we did, I think we paid like around $40 each. Which like feels expensive in Tanzania because things like on the street are very affordable. But I think it's part of this idea that like tourism is one of their biggest opportunities for like building their economy. And so they are charging like a tourist price. And I'm honestly all for it.
Okay. And I must ask, on your safari, you must have seen the big five, right?
We did see them. Yeah.
And how incredible was that?
It was amazing. I like honestly have no words. It's just like you grow up like seeing this stuff on TV and just to be honest, I also just like don't know that I ever thought this was something I would be able to do. I think my whole life I thought to myself, I'll be able to like maybe go on a safari when I'm 60 if I work my entire life. Like I just didn't think this was going to be accessible to me in my 30s. And so the fact that we did it, and because the trip was like kind of a sudden thing, I just like mentally wasn't prepared for it. And so I had this feeling like on safari of just like, wow, I just disbelief. Like, I can't believe I'm having this experience and I just can't believe I'm seeing these animals. And it's really silly to make this comparison, but like the Lion King, the landscapes that you see like in that movie are the Serengeti. And I just didn't like really piece that together until we were there. So you're just like looking out over the plains and you're like, wow, like I'm literally in the Lion King right now. And any millennial kid is gonna, I feel, relate to that experience. So
God, it's just the thought of it. It just sounds incredible. It's like, oh.
Yeah. And I also want to say like the animals obviously are a highlight of going on safari. That's what you go on safari for. But something I didn't go into the experience really ready for was like the actual experience of safari, like the people involved. Like there was a team of amazing like local guides that ran our trip, that took care of us, that taught us things, that were just like, we spent all day with them for 6 days. So we became like quite close with our guiding team, as well as the other people that were on the trip with us. So that was like a big part of the experience. It was really fun to like just like chat with them all day long and like hear about their lives. And like one of our guides, we ended up back in Arusha after our safari, and we were walking down the street one day and we hear this car like honking at us, and we look over and it's him, and he pulls over and like he's out of the car, like we're all hugging in the street. It was just like it was really great getting to know the guides, and it was just interesting to see like what goes into running a safari trip, because I hadn't really like conceptualized how big these regions, these parks are in East Africa. And so I just hadn't thought through how far we were going to have to drive and how remote we were going to be, because that's a big part of it. Like, you're not just staring at animals like
Sure,
8 hours
yeah.
a day. You are mostly driving. Like, safari is mostly driving, and it's very intense driving. So I think I just have like a really big appreciation for the infrastructure that goes into like running these trips, the skill of all the guides that are running these trips, and the energy that goes into them. Because like, it's pretty tiring to go on safari. That's also something I wasn't prepared for. You're just like dead tired at the end of every day, but it's so worth it.
God, sounds an incredible experience. Amazing. You make a great point there about the underestimating the experience of people as well. Obviously, in a group, unless you do your own safari private one, I think you kind of underestimate that. Like you say, you're spending whole days and probably even evenings with the people, right? That's quite intense.
Exactly.
If you actually think about it.
Yeah. Like, there was one, I think on our last day, because throughout the trip, like, you just get closer and closer with the people that you're in the car with. And on our last day, like, it was kind of funny. We were stopped watching this herd of elephants, like, incredible. And then while we're watching the elephants, we're all in the Jeep telling each other tongue twisters in our language. So our guide Valence is like trying to teach all of us a tongue twister in Swahili. Yeah. So he would say it in Swahili and we would try to say it back, and he would laugh his head off at how horrible we all were in Swahili. And then there were two girls in our truck who were from Swiss. They were from Switzerland, and they were teaching us like a tongue twister in Swiss. Then we were teaching one in English. It was just like moments like that, especially towards the end of the trip, where it's like, there are some elephants, like, they're amazing, but also it's just like about this connection we're making with these people.
That's funny. I've got another questions about Tanzania. So anything else you want to say maybe that's worth sharing about your trip there?
I would just say, like, it was Luke and I's first time like on the continent of Africa. Like, I'd been in North Africa before, but I'd never been to sub-Sahara Africa. And it's just like opened up a whole new world for me. I just loved every minute of our time in Tanzania, and I'm really excited to visit more regions around that part of the world. I really, really want to go to Namibia. I really want to go to Kenya. I'm just like, I keep telling people I'm Africa pilled now. I just like want to see more of Africa. So
we've never
exciting.
Been.
Yeah.
Either of us.
Don't go, because then you're just going to think about it all the time. Because now all I think about all day long is like, when can I go back to a country in Africa?
Thing is, from here, and from where you are, it's a nightmare to get to, isn't it? Crikey.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. That's a heck of a journey.
I'm going to do it though. I'm going back.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Is that official, or are you just thinking that?
It's pretty official. Like, we're pretty sure we're going to go to Kenya in January.
Okay. Fair enough. That's my
part of it is
I
I have a friend who's half Kenyan, and he'll be there in January. So we were like, okay, we got to go with our pal if he's going to be back there. So yeah.
Okay. Actually, one more question just on that part of Africa. Is there parts you need to avoid? I have no idea, to be fair.
There are. Basically, like, if you look at the travel advisory, you're going to see a lot of places to avoid. We didn't feel that we needed to be like scrutinizing that. As long as you stick to sort of the well-traveled path, you're fine. Yeah. Which is what we did. And that was the advice that was given to us by friends of ours who've traveled in the region. They were like, just go to like where the tourists go and you'll be fine. I know a lot of people like want to get off the beaten track. It was our first time in East Africa. We didn't want to like mess around, so we were not going to do that. But yeah, there's definitely people who do, and like, if you plan correctly, I think that can be done. But we don't travel to push limits. We travel to have a nice time and like meet people and learn about cultures, and we were able to do that with the route that we did.
Okay. Let's move on to Sri Lanka. It's somewhere I've not been, and it's on my list, of course. The question I have about Sri Lanka is, I think we all know maybe a few years ago, and I don't know if it's continuing, that they have a bit of an economic crisis. Did you experience that, and how has that affected travel? Has it made it cheaper to go to? What's your experience of that?
Oh, interesting questions. For context, Sri Lanka in the last few years has had their worst financial crisis in 70 years. And the biggest impact it's had is that it's driven up inflation quite a lot, like very drastically. And resources like electricity and gas have been limited. By the time we got there, it seemed like if you just arrived in Sri Lanka and had no idea that this crisis was going on, you truly wouldn't know.
Okay.
Because you don't see any evidence of it. But it was talking with our hosts in all the homestays we stayed in, where we learned like the actual impact that it's been having. The main issue is inflation. People's dollars just don't stretch as far anymore. So people are struggling to buy like the things that they need. And yeah, like resources are just more expensive. So we noticed like in our homestays, there would always be signage like asking you to turn lights off, turn your AC off, stuff like that, which to be fair, like is something you should be doing when you travel anywhere. I think that's like a good practice in general in life. I don't think people should need to be reminded, but you just notice that there's like very upfront reminders like all over Sri Lanka to do that. In terms of the status of the crisis right now, like for the most part, like things are apparently leveling out. But I think like the general population is still like feeling the pain of it. So I actually did get like a lot of DMs on Instagram from people asking like, do you think it's like responsible to travel in Sri Lanka right now? And I actually think it is, because most of the hosts that we spoke with and guides that we spoke with said that they need tourism. They want tourism back. A lot of tourism ended in the pandemic to Sri Lanka, and people really felt the burden of that. And so, yeah, Sri Lankans, like from the ones we spoke to, really want tourists to come back. It is a bit more expensive than it used to be, but if you are coming with Canadian dollars or US dollars, it is still an extremely affordable country to travel. And so I don't think like the inflation should deter you.
That's great to hear, because that was kind of my next question about, is tourism actually now more important than ever? I know
I would say so.
We're in this like world where over tourism is a problem, as we see in Barcelona recently and stuff like that. But for countries like Sri Lanka, where they had a bit of a crisis, I think as long as you do it ethically, right, I think tourism is needed, right? Surely.
I will say like there are hotspots like around Sri Lanka where I don't know if it would like I would compare it to over tourism like what you see in Europe, but there were definitely like areas we noticed where like, okay, like there's a lot of tourists here. There could probably be like less crowds. So I do think like there is the potential for issues with over tourism. I think like Sri Lanka is quickly becoming popular because it's a very safe country to travel, very affordable. And so people obviously want to go. We did try to leave like the main tourist trail a couple times, and it was really worth it. And I would say like if you want to go to Sri Lanka, obviously you want to see like the famous things like Sigiriya. Yeah. But if you can take some time to go off sort of the main route, it's definitely worth it to do that.
Did you go on the classic train rides that you see on social media?
No, this is so controversial. We didn't, because of this reason. They're so packed. And it just didn't sound like a fun time to us to be on a packed train. Yeah. And the thing is, for like, if you book like a first class ticket, you'll have a nice experience, but you have to book them really far in advance. And we don't plan that far in advance. So we hadn't planned enough to have the ticket. We did do train rides. And this is the thing. I think like a lot of people know about one specific train ride that's very famous. It starts in the city of Ella. This is the train ride that everyone wants to do. But actually, if you take a train in that region, like of central Sri Lanka, it's going to be a nice view no matter what.
And did you go to a cricket match in Sri Lanka?
We didn't. And I think while we were there, you and I talked about this.
Yeah,
and
I do remember.
There were some dates that we were like, maybe we can make it. Yeah. But it didn't line up, unfortunately.
It's a shame. No worries. Where did you actually visit in Sri Lanka? What were, apart from Colombo, obviously, what were some of the highlights?
Oh my gosh. We did a lot because we were there for a month. Hold on.
A month? Oh, wow. Okay. Actually, whilst you researched that, off the top of your head, homestays, how'd you book them?
Just through Booking. If you just search homestay, like with the location set to Sri Lanka, you'll notice a lot of them. And actually, like, they're very easy to find in Sri Lanka, which was something nice about it.
Okay.
And the thing is, like, sometimes we would try to like email outside of the booking platform just because it like saves money for your host as well as for yourself. But a lot of hosts like don't have a presence outside of booking, so you'll end up like booking through the app quite a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, they always have homestay in their name, so they're like pretty easy to find.
Cool. Good to know.
Yeah, so we started in Colombo, and we did sort of like, if you know the shape of Sri Lanka, it is kind of like a circular, it has a very distinct shape. So we did sort of a loop around, I would say, from Colombo, which is like on the west side, halfway down. We started there, and we did sort of a half loop. So we went down the south coast and then up through the central region and then back to Colombo.
Nice.
This took us a month. A lot of people do the entire island in a month, which I think is bonkers. I don't know how you do that, because like I think we're just like slower travelers than like the average person, because we had high hopes that we would make it to the northern of Sri Lanka, but we just didn't have time. But yeah, I would say like our highlights were definitely Colombo. We loved Colombo. This is again, like, we like cities. A lot of people skip Colombo.
Yeah, it gets a bad rep.
It gets a bad rap, but we really liked it. I think it's worth going. We absolutely loved Sigiriya, which is famous for, it's called Lion Rock.
Lion Rock, yeah.
A lot of people go for one day. We went and we stayed, I think, almost 5 days.
Oh, wow.
Just loved it so much.
Okay.
We rented a motorbike. We just drove all around the region. There was so much to see. So like, don't limit your time in Sigiriya. And then we spent a week on the south coast in a really small town called SK Town. This is, again, where we kind of departed from like the main tourist trail. There's a lot of like very famous beach towns you can go to that have like a lot of hostel culture and backpacking culture. We wanted like really quiet beach, and that's what SK Town was. There's a little surfing community there. So we just went surfing every day, and there were like 4 restaurants you could go to. So we would just like go from restaurant to restaurant. We became friends with like all the people that run the restaurants. It was like a great little town. Like we loved it so much.
Okay. I think the north of the country is at Jaffna up the north. That'd be pretty cool to go and experience. Way off the normal trail. Obviously it's got history with the Tamils and stuff there with the Civil War. I wonder how rustic, I don't know if it's actually that much developed compared to the south, how much difference there'd be.
We heard that you will feel a cultural difference in the north. I don't know about if it's less developed.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm intrigued as well, and I'm a little bit sad that we didn't make it there, but we didn't want to rush, so.
Sri Lanka, I imagine that's great for the budget as well, as a place to stay. SafetyWing really helped me out last year in Budapest with my tooth extraction. They covered all the costs and made it a seamless journey. For the remote workers and digital nomads who are listening, this may interest you. How do you make sure you stay safe while country hopping? What do you do if you catch a bug, get in an accident, or your passport was stolen? SafetyWing offers travel medical insurance that's specifically designed for the needs of the freelancers, remote workers, and digital nomads, no matter where in the world you are. They have a truly ambitious mission to create a global social safety net for anyone regardless of where they happen to be born. With SafetyWing, you're covered all over the world with one policy. It's a monthly subscription, so you're continuously covered and you can turn it off at any time. A cheeky little bird just told me they've recently launched a new version of their Nomad insurance product with $0 deductible and a new claim process that takes less than 5 minutes to fill in. So if this sounds right for you and for your adventures, check out my link in the show notes and make sure you save it for your next trip, which you can buy even if you're already traveling. Get covered today with SafetyWing. Which kind of leads me on to the next place, which is one of the reasons we went, because we love the country, but also budget-wise, was Nepal. Obviously, you mentioned before that you had to go home. So how long were you actually in Nepal for? And my big question here is about having a guide to hike around the country. I'm not sure if you've done any hikes whilst in Nepal, but I want to know if you heard anything or experienced anything of that, because we heard conflicting information whilst we're there last year.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about this. So we got to Nepal the beginning of March, and we intended to stay a month, but we ended up leaving about halfway through the month. But we came back. So after we went home, we went to East Asia for a bit, and then we returned to Nepal. So in the end, we actually did do a full month there. It was just broken up into like 2 parts, essentially.
Yeah.
I was really excited to go to Nepal because I'd been there before. I know my husband really well, so I knew that he was going to absolutely love Nepal, which he did. And yeah, we did want to trek. I have really bad knee problems. So we knew that we were going to have to book a shorter trek, which is kind of sad, to be honest, because I wanted to trek for longer. But I literally like have to get surgery on my knee, so that wasn't going to happen. So yeah, we booked to trek the Poon Hill circuit, which is most people do like 3 or 4 days.
4 days.
We did it with a guide, and our guide offered an extended version, which is basically like a version of it that him and his team made up that is like more interesting. It takes you like more off the sort of like well-trodden path.
That's what we did. Yeah. Same thing.
Nice. Yeah. So we did it with friendly trekkers. They were referred to me by another blogger who had had a great experience with them. They're entirely Nepalese owned and operated, which was really important to us. We wanted to make sure that who we were trekking with, like, were really local and really going to benefit off of the money we spent. There are people still trekking without guides in Nepal, but it is technically illegal. And if you are caught, you will pay a massive fine. We spoke with our guide a lot about this, and like I was really interested in what he had to say about it. He was saying like a big reason the government is enforcing this is like, yes, because it's a way to bring more tourism dollars like into the local economy. But the other big reason is safety. I think people like really underestimate like how dangerous it can be to be out that far. And if you're not Nepalese, things can go wrong. Like we thought oftentimes, like, because there were times that we were trekking that we were like, oh yeah, like we probably could have done this without a guide. But then it's like, what if something goes wrong? And actually, like when we returned to Nepal a couple weeks later, we met up with our guides to hang out, and they were telling us they had taken a group out and a woman fell and broke her ankle. And I wouldn't have known what to do if that happened to me while I was trekking in Nepal. That's what the guides are really for. Like they are there to help you if something goes wrong. And I know no one wants to think about that possibility, but it does happen. And when you're in a foreign country, having people that are local is the best thing possible for your safety. So I think that's a big piece of it as well. And it's also just like, yeah, it's expensive, but when you hire a guide, like it gives you an opportunity to like really get to know Nepalese people. Like we became really good friends with our guide. We stayed with his family in his family home multiple times. And that's like a connection that I know we're going to maintain over the years. And I already know, like, I'm going to go back to see him and his family. That's like a connection we wouldn't have made if we hadn't decided to trek with a guide. So yeah. Those are all my thoughts about it. There are definitely people out there like still doing it and telling other people to do it. But you know what? It's really not that expensive to hire a guide if you're coming from the US or Canada. So I really do think like it's worth spending the money.
Yeah, I saw a video 2 days ago. I can't remember this guy's name on YouTube, but he'd just been there and was like, yeah, you don't need a guide. They're not enforcing it. And like, he's got like millions of followers, right? Like, oh God, is that the right thing to say? My experience when I was speaking to the locals there is mixed from the locals. I got the feeling that maybe in Kathmandu, when we were speaking to our hotel or hostel owner and he was arranging it for us, he's like, yeah, that's a good move. But when we spoke to the guest house owners in Langtang village and also Kianjin Gumpa at the top, they do not agree with it. They think it will affect their business and they will not get as much income because people will be put off by hiking with a guide. And I must say on Langtang, I saw people with guides. I didn't see anyone without a guide until I got to the top at Kianjin Gumpa, and there's a few people there, and I was asking, like, I thought this is a rule. They're like, oh, well, we went to Annapurna, we had a guide, then we found some people there who didn't have a guide, and they weren't enforcing it, so we came here and didn't book a guide. But I was like, well, what happens if we get stopped? They're kind of like, oh, we just kind of plead ignorance, and they move us on. So it is hit and miss. I think you're right. I think the caveat or the carrot there of getting fined is not great. So I had a connection with my guide because Emma got ill, so she couldn't complete the trek. So he had to take her back to Serubesi to get the jeep back to Kathmandu, and I carried on with him, just us two. Yeah, got to know him. He's a cool guy. Like, yeah, just that connection's pretty good.
I mean, listen, I think like the threat of a fine is one thing, but I would hope that people book a guide because they want to support guides
Local.
in Nepal.
Yeah.
Like that. That's why we did. It wasn't the threat of a fine. It was we have the money and we should pay someone who has the skills and experience to bring us, because we learned a lot too. Like when you're with a guide, they can point things out. Like our guide pointed out so many things that we would have totally missed because like we had never been there before. And I think that's like something you can't put a price on, to be honest. I know that like I have heard other people say that like some people in Nepal, like in the tea houses, are worried that it will reduce the amount of business they get. But I actually don't know that that's true, because Nepal is like generally considered a place that's expensive to go to. Like if you can afford to fly to Nepal, like you have the money to pay for a guide.
Of course, yeah.
So I don't know. That's something that like will be revealed in time when they look at the tourism numbers. But like I actually am always curious about this, and I've looked at like the tourism numbers in Nepal, and they are still trending up. So
okay, fair enough.
I don't think it's deterring people. Maybe it's like, this is the thing. If it's deterring people, it's deterring people who are going to come to Nepal and spend no money because they're just trying to spend no money.
Exactly, yeah. Fair to say that when we went, the rule just came in, and we heard the hiking season was coming to the end, right? It's in June last year. And they just bought it in April, I think. So it's like really close. And I guess people weren't sure, and this is locals as well, whether it's been enforced, because it came in late into that season. So they're kind of saying, we don't think it'll be enforced now, but maybe September when the new season starts, it might be enforced. So they couldn't really tell you if you needed one. Also, their concern is if you don't book through a reputable company like you did, we booked through our hotel owner, so you've got to trust them to give you a guide. You need to make sure you get like a proper guide. I know there's some people who probably got scanned by just a guy on the street who can take you, but he's not actually accredited or he's not even knowledgeable about the area. So I think that's a concern you need to be worried about.
Definitely. That's why I like reached out to a couple people to get a reference before we booked into our guide. And the thing too is like all these guides charge the same amount basically, because if people are emailing different companies, everyone's going to give the same quote. So the quality that you get for the amount of money you spend will vary a lot, which is why I think it's important. Normally I am that person who's just like, I'm going to hire a guide on the fly. But in this case I wasn't. I wanted to make sure like we went with like a good guiding company. So it was worth the little bit of research we did to find friendly trekkers.
I think next time we'd do that for sure. I also met a trekking company there. I don't know if this came across on your research. I can't remember their name, but they're women only.
I have heard about them. Yeah. There's so many. Like our company told us, like the guy who runs it, his name is Kavi. He was saying there's like over 8,000 trekking companies in Nepal. So he was like, it's really hard to stand out. But yes, I actually have heard about that one because I had also thought about that. Like, oh, I would love for us to have a woman guide. But actually, Friendly Trekkers hires women, so you can request to go with a woman guide if you like through Friendly Trekkers.
I think the guide I spoke to said they only take women trekkers as well. I think that was their policy. Great to see. They're loving it. The final thing I'd say is we actually booked a guide 5 years ago or 6 years ago for Poon Hill because we actually felt at the time it was good to have a guide, right? So this is before the new rules. And like exactly like you done, he took us around these like back ways and we like went to these like little villages that just had like one guest house and that's not on the trail. We talk about this experience all the time. There's one unbelievable guest house on the top of this hill. The view is absolutely incredible. We're like, I don't think we would have got this just by going the traditional route. So yeah, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. It's true. I would also say that's another like big reason that it's worth going with a guide, because I do think like the regular Poon Hill trek, the average person can probably figure out because the paths are like pretty easy to follow. But the extended version that we did, like we definitely wouldn't have been able to figure it out on our own.
Yeah, unbelievable experience. Loved it. Okay, I don't really have anything else to add for Nepal. Just that we love it and we could always go back.
Yeah, there's one thing I will add, which is that I don't think people should think of Nepal as just a trekking place.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot more to do in Nepal. There's a lot of incredible history, ancient cities you can visit. We did Barang homestay. It was absolutely amazing. It was one of the best experiences we had the entire trip. We stayed in the village of Barang, which is up on a hill, and just stayed with this family. It was just incredible. And yeah, I think like people just think when they think of Nepal, they just think of like hiking and mountains and the Himalayas, which like obviously is a huge part of Nepal's identity. But I think that people overlook like the beautiful culture of Nepal and everything else that Nepal has to offer visitors. So if you like, the first time I went to Nepal, I didn't even trek. I just went traveling around by bus. So if you don't like to hike, if you don't want to go out into the mountains, you can still go to Nepal and have an incredible time. You can also go on safari. Like we went south in Nepal and we went on a safari and saw rhinos like up close. It was absolutely amazing. So yeah, I just like to tell everyone that.
Is that in Chitwan National Park?
Chitwan National Park, yeah.
Yeah, we went there to go on a rhino safari and didn't see any.
What?
Yeah. Like,
we saw so many.
This is quite a funny story. We booked a guest house, not a hotel, more of a guest house. And the owners are like, "Yep, we've got proper legit guides. They were legit gear and all this sort of stuff." And like, "Oh, let's go and see some rhinos." And we were there in Chitwan National Park 3 or 4 hours, and we didn't see anything but a pile of poo and a couple of steps. And anyway, so they gave up in the end, right? They kept like trying to hear for them, and we just didn't see any. So we come back to the guest house, and the owner's there with his, like, I guess his friends who run it. And they're like, "Oh, how many did you see?" And we said, "We didn't see any." And they were shocked. They're like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, you didn't see any." Like, "What? Nothing?" And like, he's chatting to the guide, like, "No, nothing." He goes, "That's crazy. I don't think I've ever heard that before."
I don't think I have either.
Yeah, that's it.
Like, I think there's some seasons where it's harder to see them, but we were technically there during a season where it's hard to see them, and we still saw a lot.
What month was that?
I think it's like so hard to remember now. May? I think we were there in May.
Same time as us.
Yeah. Wow.
I know. Devastating.
That's wild.
I know. But like you say, not just hiking. Yeah, we dotted around the country on the bus.
Yeah.
The buses are tough in Nepal. The roads are crap. So you need to have patience.
Yeah.
I will say that. Okay, South Korea. I want to mention South Korea because we went for the first time last year. Have you been before?
Never.
And if you've never been before, I thought Seoul was a great city. One of my favourites from last year.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, loved it.
It wasn't our favourite. I'll just be honest about it.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
We ended up liking Busan more, but like this is
Busan
an
was
age-old
great.
argument. Like a lot of people argue over this. I will also say, like, for context, we didn't think we were going to go to Korea at first.
Yeah.
The reason we went is because when we went home to Canada, we were basically just looking for like the cheapest flight back to a country that we were happy to go to. The first goal was to go straight back to Nepal, but it was too expensive. Then we looked at Japan. Also too expensive, but Seoul, there was a direct flight and it was like manageable. So we thought, okay, let's just go to Seoul, like do a week in the city and then go to Japan, because we had it in our minds that we were going to go to Japan next if Nepal wasn't possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, then we eventually were like, actually, like if we're going to fly to Korea, we should like do justice for Korea. So we should spend at least 2 weeks. So that's what we decided on, and we were kind of like flexible with it. We had a visa for a month, so we were like, we can stay longer if we want. Let's just see how it goes. When we flew to Korea, yeah, we had just been home. Like things were very emotional. Things were really hard with our family. And so by the time we got to Seoul, I think we were in a really bad headspace. So I think that this may have like impacted how we felt about Seoul, because we were just extremely jet lagged. Like, the flight is really hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
So we were extremely jet lagged. We were sad. and we were like just emotionally drained from the last 2 weeks. So I don't want to discourage people from going to Seoul because it was a really cool city. I think maybe we just didn't get the most out of it because we were just like in a bad headspace while we were there.
And that's fair enough. I think people can forgive you for thinking that.
I hope so.
I think that would have been the same anywhere you went. Yeah, so that's a fair point.
Yeah.
But Busan, amazing little beach city down there. Awesome weather we had there, and great beaches, super safe, super like clean.
Yeah.
Oh, just loved it down there.
Yeah. Yeah, we really loved Gamcheon Cultural Village. We just thought the history of it was really interesting. It's a neighborhood where a lot of refugees fled to during the Korean War. So it started out almost like a slum, like a very low income neighborhood. And then in the 2000s, the government wanted to revitalize it and find a way to like bring tourism into the community to help improve living conditions. And they actually pulled it off. It's now like a very popular place for tourists to visit. So it just has a really interesting history. It's a really beautiful neighborhood. And yeah.
Did you take a day trip to Gyeongju?
We stayed in Gyeongju, actually. We stayed there, I think, 3 days. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So the route we did was Seoul. We stayed in Seoul for a week. And then we went to Jeonju, which is close. It's only, I think, like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then from Jeonju, we went to Gyeongju. And then Gyeongju to Busan.
Oh, nice. You stayed there. That'd be pretty cool. We didn't have the time to stay, so we'd done a day trip then and sort of walked around the traditional villages, and super hot day that was, but unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, love the culture there, love the buildings, love the vibe, very green.
It was very nice to get out of the city in Korea, and I'll say the same about Japan. So we later went to Japan on the trip, and it was our second time there, and so we decided to focus less on cities and more on the countryside. And I think that for both Japan and Korea, this is the way. Obviously, the cities are famous and worth visiting, but it's just a very different experience to leave those cities and experience like the countryside. And it's very accessible to do so. Like, transport is so great in East Asia. You can really get anywhere by bus or by train. And so it's really worth it because I think we spent like a week in Jeonju and Gyeongju, and those are like quieter, smaller places that just were a completely different experience that we really enjoyed.
Was there anywhere or anything like on your mind to do in Korea, or was it literally just get back into the mode of traveling a little bit?
Yeah, I would say that was the country we were the least prepared for. I think because we had just been so stressed for like the 2 weeks prior. We didn't plan very much for Korea, and we didn't really go into it knowing what to expect. To be honest, like, it had not been on either of our radars. Like, we had never thought, let's go to South Korea. So it was kind of like a surprise, but that was kind of nice. Like, we went into it with very little expectations, and we ended up really loving it. And I think it's just one of those places that's really nice to not overplan and just like take things in, like wander the markets, eat the food, pop into the random little shops. Yeah, like, it's just a place you just want to exist and be. I kind of feel the same about Japan. Like, you can plan a lot of activities, but it's also just nice to like be there. And that's how I found Korea. And we were lucky too, because my sister lived in Korea for 3 years, and my husband's cousin lived there, I think, for 7 years. She lived there for like many, many years. So we had the two of them as resources, and my sister still had like a lot of Korean friends that she put me in contact with. So we were able to figure things out on the fly, which was helpful.
I think we were the same for Korea. I don't think we actually had anything planned. Even Busan was not planned until we got there, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think we were just, that's why we loved Seoul, because we didn't really know what we were doing day to day. We're like, oh, what should we do today? And it's like, oh, let's make it up for this morning. Let's go for coffee. And then let's just see where we end up. So maybe it's that kind of freedom of no pressure on it. Just, exist and see what you find.
Yeah. Yeah. And the tourism infrastructure is really great. Like, we relied so much on the little like tourism information booths, and everyone was so friendly. Like, we would go and they'd give us a map, and they'd be like, go here, go here, go here. So it was actually like really easy to travel there.
And Korea and Japan are like easy places to travel in terms of it's just nice, great transport links. Most people can sort of converse with you if you're trying to find somewhere. Like, it's a nice, relaxing place to travel, I find.
Yeah. The only place we knew we were going to go to in Korea was the DMZ. That was the only place that we were like, we have to go. while we're in Korea.
What was the go with that? We didn't really entertain it that much, I don't think.
Yeah, so it's just the Korean demilitarized zone. So it's like that band of land that separates North Korea and South Korea. And you can go on these registered tours where they'll take you and you basically just learn. Like, to be honest, there's not a lot to see. It's just land. And there's a few sort of like information centers and stuff. There's like really famously a viewing point you go to where you can like look through binoculars into North Korea. And if you're lucky, they say like you'll spot a North Korean. But for us, it was just like the history bit that we were interested in. And I would say like it was where we learned the most about the history of the Korean War and the sort of like current political climate and tensions between North and South Korea. It was really fascinating to us to like sort of come to understand that and then travel through the rest of Korea, because you probably remember this, like there's so much CCTV, there's so much military presence like all throughout Korea, but especially in Seoul because it's a northern city. And the DMZ tour just gave us a lot of context about that. And it gave us context on like how Koreans feel about like the state of this conflict. And yeah, I just found it like really interesting and I was glad we did it.
Yeah, we went to the War Memorial in Seoul. I don't know if you've done that as well, but that was our learning experience of the war. I don't know too much about it before then, so and the way it ended as well was quite interesting. Yeah. Well, technically not ended, but stopped. Okay. One thing I didn't like about Korea is the food. It's not my jam.
You didn't? Really?
No.
Wow. I think it's either you either love it or you really don't like it, because I actually know someone who used to live in Korea and she lived there for 2 years and she loved living there, but she told me like the food was the one thing she struggled with.
Yeah, couldn't do it.
Whereas my husband like absolutely loves Korean food.
Yeah, trying to find vegan options, nightmare. So there are options, but like I think we said maybe pre-recording, I don't know, or at the start, that you really have to budget for like those specific restaurants, which are quite expensive in a place like that. So I did try a few things on the street market and they're okay, like mung bean pancakes and stuff like that, but not a favourite. Well, food for me was really hard. It's not a great place if you have a peanut allergy. So that's honestly why we spent less time there. Like normally on a long trip like this, because we have time, we want to spend like at least a month everywhere we go. But we decided to just cut it at like 2.5 weeks because just eating for me was too hard. Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, I haven't got really anything about Japan because I want to get to Sicily before asking some interesting questions about your trip. Sure. Did you do the Japan Rail Pass? If so, did you get stung by the increase in prices?
We didn't do the pass. We took buses. This is like a little known thing. You don't need to spend all the money on the train. It is a fun experience. We did take the bullet train, the Shinkansen, one time, but we took it for a short leg of the trip where we actually needed to save the time. So it was worth the money we spent. But after that one Shinkansen ride, we just took buses the entire time. The bus system in Japan is fantastic. The buses are super comfortable. It's extremely affordable. So if you are on a budget and going to Japan, like don't even bother with the trains. Just take buses everywhere.
Same as Korea. We took buses, no trains.
Us too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the last country, I probably won't talk about London, but Sicily, Italy. Now, I do remember when you're putting stuff up that this looked absolutely dreamy. And I think because you obviously have other friends or some family members there who can maybe show you the real experience, it just looked like the dream life. Like sunny, great food, chilling out in water. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Big fan of Italy over here, especially Sicily.
Yeah. People don't really tend to talk about Sicily that much, do they? I don't think. I've not heard much about it.
Yeah, it's funny. I think it just doesn't have the same appeal as like northern destinations in Italy, which is unfortunate because I think Sicily is really special. But I do think that the White Lotus, the season that took place in Sicily, has changed things because just for context, my husband is half Sicilian. His dad is Sicilian. So he has a lot of family roots there, and he and I together have gone to Sicily like multiple times over the years. So we've been going, I think the first time I went was 2014, and we've been going together ever since. And so we've really seen how like things change over time. And this was the first time that we were in Sicily that we were like, wow, there's actually like crowds in Palermo now. We'd never seen that before. So I do think like it's starting to gain more of a reputation, especially because I think more and more people are just annoyed by how busy and expensive northern Italy is. I think a lot of people are now thinking about Sicily because it is more affordable and it is less busy in general.
And were you there for the off season, would you say?
I would say like yes and no. We were there the first 2 weeks of June, which are kind of the start of the season, I would say. Like I would say proper off season is October to April, maybe. If you want like to be honest, I think June and September are the best months to go because it's like nice and warm. You can swim, but it's not boiling hot. In August and July, it is really hot. Like Luke's family was telling us that it hits like 40 degrees easily in July and August. So I think like June and September are probably the best times to go.
Okay. And what's your favorite Sicilian dish?
Oh, that's so hard. Arancini, I think. They're like fried rice balls. They're just so good. And you can get like all sorts of different fillings. There's vegetarian options. Yeah, they're amazing.
Okay. Could you live there, do you think?
100% I could live there. Luke's working on getting his citizenship.
Oh, not another one. I spoke to someone else today getting an Italian passport. Oh yeah, that was I was a guest on another podcast earlier actually. They're talking about getting their Italian citizenship.
Yeah. I don't know that we would live there full time, but I think, and like full disclosure, Luke's family like inherited a house there in his like in the village that his family members were all born in. So we do have a property there that's like managed by Luke's dad and his brothers. And so it's sort of like the family house, everyone goes, like we all take our times to go. So really like if we get citizenship, it'll be more about just like being able to extend the amount of time that we spend there. I could see us going for like 3 to 6 months a year type thing.
Wow.
Sometimes I joke to Lucas, I'm like, I just married you because you're Italian.
Yeah.
When I met you and you told me you were Italian, I knew I had to marry you.
In you go. Yeah. No messing about. Lovely. Okay, we can talk all day about the trip, but I think that's a good overview. I just got some questions about what you've learned from the trip, because I'm keen to know what you're thinking between your last long trip to this long trip. We've both been on long trips. So I want to see what we both think about certain questions. I guess my first question is going to be the price of travel. Did you find it more expensive, cheaper, or the same? If there is anything that's different, what has changed?
I would say the biggest shock was the price of flights.
Yes.
You definitely noticed that flights are more expensive. In general, I wouldn't say that I found traveling more expensive, like slightly, but not to a degree that I was like, this is not sustainable. It's all like contextual, right? Like in Japan, because the yen is low right now, it cost us the same amount to travel Japan as it did in 2017 when we were there, because like they haven't had inflation because of the yen.
Yeah.
So there's like little like nuances like that complicate it. But yeah, I would say the shock was flights. Like you definitely notice that you're paying a lot for flights. I can actually tell you how much we spent on flights. We spent $12,000 on flights. Mind you, this includes our flights to and from Canada for the emergency trip.
Yeah,
so
of course. Yeah,
that's like kind of half. That is half that number, but it's still an extraordinary amount of money to spend on flying.
I think we were crying when we booked our flight from Seoul to Vancouver. That was a low moment. I think in Cyprus, like, what was that? I think that's actually influenced my November trip. I was going to go to Asia, but I can't justify the cost of going across and back again.
Yeah,
just can't do it.
Yeah, I think that. Listen, I don't think it's great that it costs this much to fly. It makes travel very inaccessible for people. I think like the only silver lining that I see in this is that I think it will encourage people to do less harmful flight hopping.
Yes.
Which is like a big thing in tourism. People are like, I'm going to Europe. I want to go to 4 countries on Ryanair while I'm in Europe for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a very sustainable way to travel. And I do think like flight prices are going to impact the way people travel in that sense. Even for us, I think that if we had stuck more to South Asia, our spend on flights would have been a lot less. In the future, when we do another long trip like this, like we will pick a region of the world and we will try to like not fly at all once we get to that region. Yeah.
Same. Absolutely
I think it's
key.
the way. Yeah.
I think it's the only way. I can't think of any other way that I'd rather do it, because we had to fly in between Middle East countries, right? We tried to do it overland. We tried to get a bus from Dubai to Oman, but 3 days in advance, booked out, running out of time. Too many flights last year and too much cost. And I think you're right. One area, try and overland it. That's the way to go. Yeah. My next question was, how many flights did you take?
I actually don't know. I'd have to calculate it, but a lot.
Do you want to calculate it? Yeah.
Oh, like I hate that I'm about to say this number. We took 11 flights.
Oh, I was like, count mine. Ours is more. Okay, 11.
That's a lot though. But you guys traveled longer than we did. I think 11's too much. Like honestly, this is my one regret about the trip. I think we flew too much. It's not sustainable. Like we should have flown less.
Yeah, that's the same regret we have. Yeah, the cost and also
and part of it is the hopping around. Like towards the end of the trip, we didn't talk about this, but we went to Georgia, which was kind of a detour. And so that's like 2 more flights that like we probably could have skipped. But you always, when you're on a trip like this, you just think to yourself, I don't know when I'm going to have this kind of time again to like go to some of these places. And Georgia was one of those countries that we were like, it's kind of out of the way. It's a hard trip to do from Canada. So we wanted to essentially like do it while we were on this long trip, and we knew we had the time to do it.
Where were you flying from to get to Georgia?
Nepal.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. It was complicated. Listen, like geographically, it wasn't a bad route because we basically went east from Nepal to Georgia, and it was a pretty direct flight. And then from Georgia, we went south to Sicily.
Yeah, because someone asked me today, how do you reduce your flights in a trip like that? And I was thinking, well, it's all about geography. If you are intent on want to maybe go to certain countries in Middle East and then go to South Asia, and Nepal is a great example, like something like Bhutan or whatever. I mean, overland is bloody difficult. You're going to have to fly. I mean, there's no other way around it. Yeah. So, yeah, we took 15, I think I counted there, which is a bit grim. It's not a great thought to have.
I think about like other long trips I've done. Like, for example, I did 9 months in Southeast Asia, and I think I did 4 months backpacking Europe. Those trips I barely flew at all. Yeah. I was just taking trains and buses everywhere. So that was definitely like a mistake on our end. But I will say like part of it was because of our emergency trip home. Of course. But it was also because we were meant to go to India, but my visa got denied. So that messed up our route. Like we'd intended to fly from Tanzania to Sri Lanka and then just travel north, literally overland all the way from Sri Lanka all the way up to Nepal. But because I couldn't enter India, we had to fly over it because I wasn't allowed in.
Rejected. I think we can speculate as to why. Maybe India's an interesting place, right? Hey, just a quick one. I just want to say there are many ways to support this podcast. You can buy me a coffee and help support the podcast with $5. Or you can go to my merch store with the affiliate link with TeePublic, where there's plenty of merch available to buy, such as t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, and also some children's clothing. Thirdly, which is free, you can also rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or Good Pods. Also, you can find me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Simply just search for Winging It Travel Podcast, and you'll find me displaying all my social media content for travelling, podcast, and other stuff. Thank you. My friend got rejected, and he's a journalist, but he was going on a leisure trip, but they said no. Yeah. So that tells you all you need to know at the minute.
Is he Canadian?
Nope. UK. British. Yeah. Okay. What's going to watch cricket? Won't let him in.
Yeah. Tell him I feel the pain. I'm really distressed because I was really excited to go to India, but yeah.
they went to Tokyo instead. So not bad alternative.
Yeah. So basically what happened to us, like because India, we were meant to spend 2 months there. The reason we went to East Asia is because the 2 months we spent in India, we had to spend it somewhere. So yeah.
Got to go somewhere, haven't you?
Yeah.
Next question. I don't know if this is more about what time of year you go, but when we went on our trip last year, because most of the places were off season, maybe apart from the road trip, we found we didn't actually meet that many backpackers or travellers in hostels or at all, really. The most I met was I'd done a one group tour, which obviously in a group, and I think we could barely count many people we met. I met a couple of people in Langtang in Nepal because on the trek. But yeah, did you meet many backpackers or travellers outside maybe of the groups you're doing, because that's obviously going to be full of people?
I would say less than we did on previous trips, and that's only because we are in our 30s now. We don't want to do dorms anymore. This is just something that we've accepted about ourselves. Yeah. So we were just always booking, like sometimes we would do private rooms in hostels, but we find and hostels are often owned by like larger companies. So we were trying to stick with like really like small guest houses that we knew were locally owned. And when you do that, like we would meet other travelers sometimes in our guest houses, but like in Sri Lanka, for example, all our homestays, there was like a lot of the time no one else staying there. In Georgia, we didn't meet a single soul. Like there was no one staying in the guest houses. I think like the only places we met people a little bit were when we spent a week in that beach town in Sri Lanka. We would just run into people on the beach repeatedly. And that's really it, honestly. Oh, we met a really nice Dutch woman in the small hotel we stayed in Moshi in Tanzania.
Okay.
And we ended up having dinner with her a couple times. Like that was nice. We had a good time with her. But yeah, kind of like you're saying, it was mostly just like when we did group tours that we met people. We were also puzzled because we didn't meet any Canadians. Not a single one.
Oh, wow. God.
Yeah.
That's interesting. This might sound awful. I can't remember anyone.
From your trip, really?
Apart from the group tour. But the interesting with the group tour is a Portuguese company recommended to me.
Yeah.
And the guide who lived in Beirut speaks both because he used to live in the UK, so it's fine. But it's a weird dynamic because he's going to have to do the same thing twice. He's going to have to speak to the guys in Portuguese and then bring me to a side and speak English to me, which is fine. But in the general context of a group, I couldn't converse that much because I can't speak Portuguese. Yeah. And there's only a few who would speak English.
Yeah. And
it's also that weird vibe where like they're having a laugh with themselves, but what they're joking about, they can't really translate into English, so you can't really be part of it. And I was totally fine with it. I knew what I was getting into, so I tried to join in as much as possible, right? But it's an interesting vibe. But apart from that group, apart from the two backpackers in Nepal on the trek, I can't remember anyone at all. Even like me and Emma just together, because Lebanon was solo, Nepal was solo on that trek because Emma was ill. I don't remember meeting anyone.
Yeah, we definitely met less people on this trip. Our last like long trip was that 9 months in Southeast Asia. We met a lot of people that trip, but it's because we stayed in dorm rooms. I think that's why. Also, it's just like a really popular like backpacking region.
Sure.
Like, to be honest, Nepal, you don't see as many like younger people. And I think that's like because it's people associated as being an expensive country for trekking. But yeah, the first time I was in Nepal, I met people because I stayed in dorm rooms. I think it's just the dorm room is the piece that causes it. I think if we'd stayed in dorms, we probably would have met more people, but we're just past that era.
Same. Yeah, we can't do dorms. Yeah. I totally hear you.
I need a bathroom.
I just need a bit of space. This is way too broad a question, really. But any impacts from COVID on your trip, do you think? For us, there wasn't really any impacts I can remember. Yeah.
I feel like you're asking if I noticed the impact of COVID like on the countries that we visited.
Yeah.
I would say for the most part, no, because I think everything that there was to notice is normalized here in Canada as well. So I think like everything was just like what you would expect from that perspective, if that makes sense. Like in Canada, or at least in Toronto, it's very normalized to see people wearing masks on public transit, wearing masks in shops. Like not all the time, but you do see it. And that's what we saw in basically every country we were in. I would say some you noticed it more. So like I would say Sri Lanka, we noticed more masks. Korea and Japan, we noticed much more masks. But yeah, it definitely didn't impact our trip. Like we were cautious because we always are. We don't want to be sick. So like we were on a couple flights where we would hear people coughing who were like obviously very sick around us, and we had masks with us. Like if we heard people sick around us, we always put masks on. There was one point where I had a cold in Nepal, and I don't know if it was COVID, but I just like stayed in our room the entire time to not risk it because I didn't know if there was like tests available. But yeah, for the most part, I wouldn't say that it had like any kind of real notable impact on our trip or the way that we traveled.
Okay. What we found, I don't know if you found this as well, the switch in lifestyle from working to not working and traveling. And I don't know if this was just luck or not. We were ill for the first 2 weeks, it seems, in Europe at the start of the trip. And that was like cold, couldn't sleep that well. Emma was not feeling great either. I seem to recall the only time we felt normal was like during Venice. We started to feel like a bit normal together. And then I got a tooth extraction on the go because I got an infection and my wisdom tooth wanted to come out. So I had to get that done in Budapest. So we had like a really tough start to the first 3 weeks of the trip. But I don't know if that's just by our body kind of readjusting to the new norm. I don't know if you found anything like that happening on your trip.
I would say we had the opposite. It was like we felt free. I remember, Amanda Kendall?
Yeah.
The podcaster. I remember we were in somewhere in Tanzania and I messaged her and I was like, I'm having the best sleeps of my life. And I told her, I was like, I think it's because I was really stressed out about work, but it was so normal for me to be stressed about work that I didn't know I was stressed out.
Got it.
Like the entire trip, I had the best sleeps of my life. And it's funny because I struggle to sleep. Like I'm a horrible sleeper. I don't sleep. Yeah. Suddenly I could. So
interesting.
And that started like right away for me.
God. I don't know what our situation was. Maybe we just like, maybe we're stressed.
You just had like a bad luck run, or like you just picked up a virus. Yeah.
Yeah. The best sleep I had on the trip was the road trip. Sleeping in the camper van on the campsites. Pure quiet.
Yeah.
Nothing going on.
Yeah.
Darkness as well. No light pollution.
Yeah.
I still haven't recovered from that, I don't think.
For me, it was safari, probably, because I was just so tired.
Yeah.
I would just be gone the entire night, even though we were sleeping like on the ground and there were literal hyenas outside our tents. Like I was just gone. And everyone in our group would be like, the next morning at breakfast, they would be like, oh, did you hear the hyenas? Did you hear the lions? And I'd be like, no.
Oh, hilarious. Okay. Your travel style, how different is it from the last trip? Are you too fast now? Are you too slow? Are you just got about right? Or
this is such a good question because I think it's like really different, actually. I think like the two major differences between my last trip and this trip are age.
Yeah.
I think that there's just been a vibe change now that I'm in my 30s that I'm not mad about, where I'm just like, I'm not a hostel person anymore. I still love hostels and will tell everyone to like have the hostel experience at some point in their life, but I don't know that it's for me anymore. I'm more willing to spend money now on comfort, I would say. Like there were scenarios on this trip where us in 2017 would have like forced ourselves to walk like 1 hour to save a taxi, to save like a $3 taxi. But this time around, like we would spend the $3. That's a change. We were more willing to do that. Yeah, I think like that's the main thing. Just like I used to be a lot more committed to my budget and willing to suffer for my budget. And I'm not like that anymore. I don't want to suffer. I want to be comfortable. Um, and then another one is more like, I would say since 2017, like since that trip, I've done a lot in the travel space. I've learned a lot because I started my podcast, Curious Tourism, that's like about responsible tourism. I started my blog, and both of these were avenues for me to explore a topic that I'd always been interested in, but that I'd never really like taken the time to delve into. And in the years that I've been working on both those channels, I've just learned so much. I've connected with so many people. I think I've just like had major shifts in like the way I view travel, the way I approach travel. And it's very subtle, the ways that those new views come out, like in the sort of like practical day to day of my travel. But for example, like now we make sure to try to book places that we can see are for sure owned by a local family, like small businesses. I used to just be about like booking the cheapest accommodation. So I would say like, and this is like a nice reference to Amanda Kendall's podcast, but I'm definitely a more thoughtful traveler. Definitely. Yeah, I would say those are the big differences. The other big difference that I have actually like just had a discussion with a good friend of mine about is that I think that travel in 2017, I was 27 when I went on that trip. It felt more transformative than this trip did for me.
Ah, interesting.
I didn't come back from this trip, and it's like a question that a lot of people ask. They've been like, well, how have you changed? And I don't actually think that I've changed, really. I think that I've learned a lot. So maybe I've grown, but I don't think I'm a different person.
Interesting.
I mean, you tell me. You've seen me before I went on the trip. Do I seem different to you?
I know you went for like an afternoon, but I don't know you that well. So it's hard for me to judge. Right?
Yeah. But hold on, I'll explain more about that because I've thought about this a lot.
I feel the opposite, a bit of context here.
Interesting.
I feel like this has really changed me. Yeah.
I think for me what it is when I was 27 and I traveled, my life, it wasn't very settled. So I went into that trip not knowing what I wanted out of life. And I think I was looking for a lot of answers when I went on that trip. And when I came home, I felt very discombobulated because I didn't have a job. I didn't know where I was going to live. Like nothing in my life was settled. Luke and I, like, I didn't know what our future together was going to be. There were just so many questions in my life. And I think that trip was transformative for me because I had a lot of questions I needed answered. Whereas at this phase in my life, I feel a lot more settled than I did when I was 27. I feel a lot more confident than I did when I was 27. And I went into this trip with the idea that I don't need this trip to change me, but I want this trip to give me the opportunity to make connections with people around the world. I wanted to make this trip more about other people than me, I guess, if that makes sense. I wasn't looking for questions to answer about myself. And I feel that coming home, Luke and I have a defined life in Toronto that we both really love. So I came home knowing the life I was coming home to and excited to return to it, which was a very different feeling than in 2017 when I came home with like no job, no place to live, living like 4 hours away from my boyfriend and like having no idea what my future would hold.
Okay. That's good. Yeah.
Everyone I tell this to, it's like throwing them for a huge loop. Everyone's like, what?
Well, maybe to counteract that with my own experience, is see what you think of this. When I left last year, this was like December, January, in that time, I, in my mind, did not know what I want to do with my career. It's not the be-all, end-all that I want to do, so that's a tough one to analyse because you think, well, what else is out there? So I'm like, well, if I go travelling, then I might find the answer. 2, I do like Vancouver, but I don't absolutely love it. And it was never the intention to come back. Potentially, we could have gone somewhere else. And in my mind, if I'm honest, I probably thought we were, but we came back. 3, what I learned during the trip was, and this is actually my next question after this, is that because, like you said, you started your blog and your podcast, I've also done the same. And this is new whilst traveling. And I've learned maybe how hard that is to do whilst traveling, because it's creatively quite difficult to travel and get the podcast or YouTube going, right? And I thought, well, having no income and trying to get these creative projects going and not having anywhere to live, these are all like questions that were huge. And I came back from the trip a bit more clearer about where I want to go next. Whereas before I was totally unclear. And now I know what the path is, what I'm trying to get to next. And I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I've got a few goals in mind to achieve now where they're critical for me to travel long term for any type of trip like this again. So I think in a cryptic way there, I now know that I can't travel again without an income. That's a big no-no. We need a base where we can chill out. For you, that's Toronto. I don't think for us it's really Canada, if I'm honest. And then it's like career-wise, what do I want to do properly going forward and stop winging it all the time, like the last 10 years. And this sounds a bit weird, but I had more clarity traveling when I was younger because I knew I'd just quit a job and go and get another job. There's a clarity to that.
It is interesting because what you're describing is what I just said, like I felt in 2017.
Yeah. But we're the same age, right?
I think so. I'm 34.
Yeah, 35. Yeah, so
yeah,
we've just had it at different times.
I think so. It's just we're having reverse experiences.
Yeah.
It's funny too because I think like at least for me, another part of this that I reflected on is that I think when I was 27, I was unsure of myself as a person. Like
Right.
As a young woman, I truly like didn't know who I was. And I remember at that phase always thinking like, oh, like my identity is just travel. And I came back from that trip feeling more confirmed in that identity and just like accepting it about myself. And I think that's why like this time around it doesn't feel as transformative, because that was the trip where I was like, no, this is what I'm about. Like this is my passion. I want to do this for the rest of my life. Like I never want to stop seeing the world. And it was just like I just had to like confirm that for myself on that trip, which I did. And so I didn't need to reconfirm that on this trip. And I think it's also that I think a lot of the transformative aspects for people when they travel are related to culture shock. And because Luch and I have traveled so much together already, we've gone through the culture shock experience. Yeah. And I think it's literally just like part of it is just experience, because a lot of people feel culture shock when they go to South Asia. We didn't feel it at all because we had already spent like 2 months in India together. In 2017. And I remember that trip, like that felt transformative because everything about India was a culture shock for me. But this time I didn't feel it in South Asia. Yeah. Sri Lanka and Nepal are different, of course, but like I thought I would feel more of that. And I didn't, I think because I had experience. I knew what to expect generally from this region of the world. And like obviously Japan, we had been there before, so it didn't feel like culture shock. And yeah, I think because we didn't really have any moments of feeling like actual culture shock, it didn't create like that transformative moment for us. Because I think for a lot of people, like transformation comes from working through that shock. Yeah,
I think I had that 2013. It's hard to replicate culture shock when you've had it for the first time. Mm-hmm. I'm not even sure, and unless it's a completely left field country, I'm not sure you would really get that same feeling. I'm not sure. But that's interesting you say that you mentioned earlier about identifying yourself as a traveller. I think that's what's happened to me in this trip, is I've fully accepted that now. That's what I want to do probably for most of my life now. But I can't keep doing it the way I've been doing it. It's unsustainable. You can in your 20s up to our age. I think you can probably just go around the world, get your work visas, because they finish at 35, right? You go and get your work visas, you work for 1 or 2 years, you don't care what job you do, as long as you get the money and you go again. There's a clarity in that. But this trip was like, oh no, I do want it to continue, but I can't do it the way I've done it. So that's a lot of change and big questions to ask myself as well. How can I travel long term? and how can I make an income that I'm sustainable myself? I make my own income, not reliant on a location dependent job. So these are the questions I'm trying to ask and trying to figure out now. And I think the base is a key one. If you've got a base where you can just stop for a while because you just need a break, great. We don't have that, so we couldn't really go anywhere to chill out for a bit. That was a bit tough towards the end.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I mean, that was a huge solace for us, coming home to our apartment that I've lived in now for 10 years.
Yeah,
and just having that home. There's something to be said for that. And the last thing that I would say about this, especially about the identity of a traveler bit, is that I think that it's really easy to doubt yourself in that identity because there are so many versions of traveler that we see portrayed online now. Mm-hmm. And so many people online telling you need to do it this way, or you're not a traveler unless you're doing it this way. You're not a traveler unless you've quit your job and are living and working remotely on your own small business. There's so many narratives around this now. I think that it's really easy to feel that you're not doing it the right way. And when it comes down to it, I think having an identity as a traveler is really sometimes I think it's silly because who isn't? Most people on the planet want to travel. Everyone I know in Toronto likes to travel. It's not that unique of an identity. I think what you and I are saying is that we've recognized that this isn't something we're going to grow out of. A lot of people move on to other, they decide, now I want to have children and focus on family. That's not my future. I know that my future is to have no kids and just continue traveling aggressively.
Same. I think we're the same. Yeah.
So I think that's why we feel that we need to accept that identity. But yeah, I just think it's tough these days because there are so many narratives around it. And I also find a lot of people, I've even felt honestly, kind of shamed, as a travel blogger, am I really a travel blogger because I have a home base in Toronto and I also work a 9 to 5? There's these narratives out there that you're not, unless you put everything into it and travel the world full time. But it's not for everyone. And I don't think it makes sense that it be for everyone. I think everyone should just travel in the way that works for them. And the only way you know that is by doing it yourself.
Yeah. And I think that is different levels, right? And I think what you said there was interesting. Let's not get too deep here a little bit. But what we have found is that if you do want to travel in the future without the constraints of paid time off, which is not very much, could be 2, 3, 4 weeks a year, which isn't a lot, then you're not going to conform to the other pressure, which we haven't mentioned, is that you get a lot of things online telling you shouldn't be doing this. You should be doing the classic route of, I guess, the kids in the house and the mortgage and then the career, right? But if you don't want to do that, and it's very hard to go against that and figure a way out around that. And I think to add to that, we're starting to find mid-30s, like you say, probably no kids. I mean, there's a lot of people in our age group who do have kids now, and that is a huge shift in your own friendship with those people, but also trying to find people who think the same as you. And that's quite a difficult path to go down because we have a lot of friends at home in Norwich, in UK, where if we moved there, you think it'd be great, but actually they're probably be preoccupied most of the time with their kids. So it's not actually the same anymore. And you probably remember from before when it was the past, not now this new future with the added human beings in their life, which is fine, but it's just a different dynamic.
Yeah. Oh, I feel you on that. It definitely changes when everyone around you is having children. And it's not a bad thing. It's just it makes it harder to relate. And people just don't have time for you like they used to when they didn't have children. And I just find people who have kids, it's all consuming. And if that isn't your life, it's really hard to have a relationship with people. And I commend people that want to have families and raise children. It's an amazing thing to do.
Different level though.
It's just not for me. Yeah.
Really ask you actually about traveling without an income. I know you have a bit of income from your blogs and stuff like that. Did that take the hit of the budget you're spending? Because for us there was nothing going in, right, at all. And that's quite a difficult thing to watch. I know you had your backup funds, but did your own little income per month take the hit off a little bit where you're spending more money?
I would say, yeah, it was definitely nice to know that we had that money like coming in, and we didn't touch it. It's not like tons of money. I probably earn like on average like $3,000 to $4,000 a month mainly from my blog and like affiliate income. Keep in mind that's like pre-tax, so I have to like pay some of that back to the government when I file my taxes next year. But basically like all of that money I was just putting into savings to add to like our returning home fund. Basically the way we viewed that income was, it'll be like a little extra to help us when we go home and presumably don't have jobs. So yeah, I would say like for me, it was a good thing for my mental health because it did give me like peace of mind. Because I also knew like if we had to, we could survive off that income, even though it's very small. I knew like we could scrape by if we had to off that income.
Yeah, that's true. That's so good. Oh. I actually got some work later in the year just related to the podcast, right? And that kind of took the blow of kind of that weird period of time where you're not traveling but you're not working and you're kind of in that middle phase, right? Yeah, that was needed at the end, but watching your account go down, I can't do that again. So that's one of the lessons learned, right? Yeah. Last couple of questions, like creatively, how did you get on with your podcast and blogging? Did you find it tough to do both whilst traveling?
I didn't work on the podcast while we were traveling. I knew it would be impossible, and it definitely was impossible.
Yeah.
Because I will say like a big part of this trip for us was that we wanted to just travel. Like some people have asked me this because my job that I had before we went on this trip was fully remote. Like I fully could have just worked the entire 6 months. But we went into it believing that the trip was about not working. Because we are going to work most of our lives. Like we just wanted 6 months to not be working. Yeah. So I made the conscious decision, obviously with Katie, to not do the podcast during the trip. I had some freelance clients. I put all of them on pause. Obviously my full-time job was on pause. The only work I did was a little bit of work on my blog, really just to upkeep it. People anyone listening, don't let anyone tell you that a blog is a passive income, because it's not. It will generate money if you're not working on it, but you have to upkeep it for it to like continue to generate income. So I think I was aiming for like 2 blogs a month while we were traveling, which doesn't take that much work. So that's like probably what I did. I don't really remember, but there were phases where I would go like 6 weeks not writing something, and then 1 week I would have motivation and I would like write 2. So it really varied. But even doing that, like I don't know how full-time bloggers do that. Like I know bloggers that are just like traveling around all the time, writing and publishing. I don't know how they do it, because like I had 0 motivation. I had to like fight myself to sit down and write a vlog, because I just wanted to like live in the moment.
Yeah, of course. Like live in the moment, but also be tired at the end of the day. Like you talk about sleep earlier. Every day I seem to recall traveling last year was just, I was knackered. I was sleeping well because we've been walking 10, 15,000 steps. We've done all this stuff. Yeah. It's like the best kind of tiredness, right? But there's no motivation there to do anything. Getting the podcast out was almost impossible. I did, but the quality is not great. I don't know how
you did it. Yeah. Basically, I had like no creative motivation. The only thing I did actively throughout the trip was post to my social media, because I had a lot of momentum during the trip and it was fun. Yeah. Like my account grew quite a lot while we were traveling, I think because I had like a fun narrative going about our trip and people were really engaging with it, which was fun for us. Like we liked all the comments and the DMs we would get. We made like incredible kind of like online friends, I guess you could say, through that. And so I did try to actively post like reels and stories as we were traveling, but I will say like sometimes it was exhausting. I don't know how people do that either, traveling full time.
No idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other lessons learned that we've not talked about? You can just like reel them off. You have to explain them. But anything else you learned from your trip that you'll be taking forward into the next 6 months to a year?
Yeah, I guess like the big ones, which we've like talked about already, are just like try to go slower. I wouldn't say that we are like quote unquote slow travelers, but we definitely travel at a slower pace than the average person. I think we're kind of like in the middle ground. We traveled a lot slower than we ever have on previous trips, and I highly recommend it because it just gives you time to get to know places a lot better, to get to know people. And I think like a big change in this trip for us was, like just booking more local accommodation and looking for homestays. Some of our best experiences were staying in homestays. And so that's something I'm going to be continuing to do. And I would say like if you want to really have like cultural experiences, that's probably the best way to do it. So if you've never done homestays on your travels, like definitely look to do that on your next trip. And I guess like lastly, I would just say like all I've learned from this trip, like my biggest lesson is just that I have to do it again.
Oh God, that's my next question. When's the next one?
I don't know, but it will happen.
It will happen. Okay.
Yeah. It's funny because when we came home so this is like kind of long-winded, but I did my first like big trip in 2010, and I remember coming home from that trip and being like, I have to do another one. So I did another one in 2014, and I came home from that trip and I just thought I have to do another one. And so then I did another one in 2017, came home from that trip, was like, I have to do another. So I did it in 2024, and now I'm home from that trip with the same thing. So like it seems like every like 4 to 6 years that happens. So I think that's probably like a good marker for when this will happen again.
You've got some good data there to go on. I think you're right. 4 to 6 years. Interesting.
Yeah. It's mainly tied to money, honestly.
Yeah.
Like how quickly I can like muster up the money.
Yeah. It's all about money, isn't it? I think for us.
Yeah.
I was actually going to ask what you got planned for the rest of the year, but you're going to Kenya in January.
Yeah, a couple of things. I have a few trips around Canada coming up. I'm going to PEI next week and
dream.
Thunder Bay. Yeah. And then Cape Breton again later in the year. Mm-hmm. So lots around Canada. And then in the fall, I might be going to Thailand. It's actually for work, but if I go for work, I'll be staying extra, obviously, just to spend some time. And then, we have some other like ideas we're bouncing around. Luckily, like our jobs are flexible, they're remote. So we'll probably do like a couple like sort of mixture trips where we remote work a little bit. But the big one will definitely be Kenya in January.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be amazing. Awesome. Okay. And I want to finish on your own podcast, just to touch on it, because it's changed its name to Curious Tourism Podcast from the old name. I don't think we need to mention the old name, do we? I'm not sure what the rules are.
No.
But what's the plan for the podcast? You mentioned you didn't do much during your trip. So what's in the pipeline now?
To be honest, I haven't thought about it.
Oh, fair.
I know. That's not the answer people are expecting. I'm going to touch base with my producer, Katie. Yeah. Because to be honest, we've only been home a couple weeks. So I've just been trying to like ease back into life. So eventually I'll have a discussion with Katie and we'll decide when we want to launch a new season. I know that a new season will definitely be coming. I just don't know when. And right now I'm just trying to like settle back into life. So I'm trying not to put like pressure on myself to do it right away. But I will tell you, I have a long spreadsheet where I've already planned an entire season and more. So it's definitely coming. I just don't know when yet.
Okay. That's good to know. And people can catch your episodes that you've done previously on all the classic podcast platforms.
Yes. We have over 100 episodes, so there's lots to listen to.
100? Wow. Great. Okay. I don't think I have anything else to cover. Quite long. So I appreciate you making time and sticking with it. I've got loads more questions, but I appreciate I can't go on forever. So, we've kind of learned a lot about your trip and what you thought about your trip as well. It's been great.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's always great to catch up.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Stay safe and don't forget to get travel medical insurance if you're hitting the road soon. I recommend SafetyWing. I'll be getting SafetyWing for my trip in November to El Salvador, and I've linked it in the show notes below. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast episode today. If you've been inspired by today's chat and want to book some travel, if you head to the show notes, you'll see some affiliate links below which help support this podcast. You'll find Skyscanner to book your flight, You'll find booking.com to book that accommodation. Want to stay in a super cool hostel? You'll see Hostelworld down there too. You'll find Revolut to get your travel card sorted. Click the GigSky link to get your eSIM ready for your trip. And more importantly, you'll find SafetyWing insurance to get that travel insurance for your trip. There are many more to check out, so when you click that link and book your product, a small commission goes towards me and the Winging It Travel podcast. Thank you in advance and enjoy your travels.